Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Director of Operations of Kognito Interactive, Nick Smolny, to introduce the Founders Tell-All panel.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Founders Tell-All. This is going to be a 20 to 25-minute discussion panel, followed by a 5 to 10-minute QA from the audience. Just so we can get an idea as the panelists are filing in. We're all curious kind of what everyone's background is. By a show of hands, how many of you are in a management role in a company already? All right, seems like a good number, maybe 10% or something like that. And how many of you are interested in starting your own company? Okay. Oh, roughly the same percentage. And I guess everybody else is sort of the other category. You know, this panel is about, you know, talking to the panelists about their experiences founding companies or running companies. And without further ado, the panelists are made up of, if you guys could just kind of raise your hand as I introduce you. Jay Moses, Ron Goldman, Joe Kwong, and Anne Shongwe. So each of these panelists comes from a very varied background. It's diverse. It covers everything from bootstrapping to exiting out of a very successful company to coming from a social development background to getting started from traditional media. And now they've all sort of migrated into you know, making games with an impact. So would you guys please tell us briefly about your company and what your role in it is? Maybe we could start off with Anne over on the right.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My role at Afros is many things. I am I suppose I find and build partnerships. I find and employ people. I manage that. I you know, work with ideas and look for the, you know, sort of right story that we want to build on, looking for the funding partners, looking for the entire project, and really just running the business. I also do the financial side of the business and employment and sort of running every aspect of the business. It's really, I should have about 5 business cards.
Okay, and Jay, if you could follow up.
Yes, the company is called Bagooba, Inc., and it was born out of the movie Monsters, Inc., and it is a power plant for emotional energy, and the mission statement for the company is to tap into the world's emotional energy and empower humanity. The first product that we have out right now is called WeChi, which is W-E-C-H-I. And WeChi is specifically built as an empathy machine. And I can talk more about that in a bit.
Thank you, Jay. And Ron?
Hello, everyone. Name is Ron Goldman. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Kognito. Kognito is a studio of about 25 people located here in the city. We develop virtual role-play conversations, mainly in the area of health, helping people impact others in terms of their behaviors and their health. My role as the CEO of the company is mainly concentrating on marketing and business development.
Thank you. And Joe, finally.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joe Kwong from Nuvana. We're based in San Francisco, and we have a branch here in New York. What we do is we make socially networked games that change behavior in the real world. We've been around since about 2006, 2007. My role as creative director is to oversee the game design portion of the projects that we build and work with a very interesting and diverse team of creatives, from designers to coders to producers, and trying to, as best we can, keep everyone on the same page, while at the same time, our philosophy at Nuvana is to let everyone, especially if they have a creative gene within them, let them loose to do as they see fit on a particular platform.
Great. Now that we know you guys, maybe you can give us some background, kind of how you were able to build your team.
Well, at Afroes, first of all, a little bit about Afroes. We are based in South Africa and in Kenya, and we built Afroes to unlock the potential of young Africans using media form that we felt would actually enable them to interact and begin to challenge the way that they think about problems and begin to start solving problems in communities. We build mostly mobile-based games on different sort of social issues. And so I came from a background with the United Nations, so I came from a development background, and I didn't, I had done some media work in film as part of my graduate degree, but I didn't have any background in game design. And so to build a team, the first thing I did was to bring in actual game designer who works in games for learning in Canada. He's probably in the room somewhere, Kevin Key, and a group of others. There he is, right there. That's Kevin. So brought Kevin and a group of people who were interested in unlocking the potential of young Africans, and we started talking about what's possible. And that started us off, and then we went through a process of, so Kevin was advising us right at the start, but we then went on to, I brought in a group of MBA students from Oxford who, one of them was from Kenya, and I'm from Kenya, and so I knew him, and so he brought in a team with him. And that team helped us to actually build the first sort of business model and think about what is the actual platform, and we clarified that without a doubt, it's mobile for Africans, and so we began to build that team, and one of the 4 MBA guys came back, Phil Broman, who may be in the room, or he's out there demoing our game across the street. And so Phil came in, and he was playing different roles: CTO, game designer, marketing, project management, and a local South African young man from a fine arts school who was actually focusing on user engagement. So that was a core team for the past 2 years. And then this year, I've hired 2 more. We have a formal CTO and a...
So there were a core group of founders in the space, and then you kind of have been
Yeah, we just started building a team
right.
and pulling them, and then we've got contract workers that we work with, game development companies.
Right. So you kind of were bootstrapping it on your
Lots
own.
of bootstrapping, but we also got lots of support, and we'll talk about our funding model as we go along.
And Ron and Joe, would you say you also were bootstrapping? Is that kind of how you guys wound up building your team?
Actually, we were quite lucky. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting came to us and said that they had this American History and Civics Initiative, which I think you may have seen one of the projects that came out of it yesterday, or day before yesterday in the badging workshop. And they wanted to reach teenagers to teach them American history, and they were having real difficulty with the programs that they were looking to fund. And they said, look, you've had experience at PBS and also at MTV. What would you do? And I quickly wrote up this proposal that ended up getting funding. So we were jump-started quite quickly, and in the process, I pulled in one of the best producers in the world, a fellow named Jeff Fino, who co-founded WildBrain. And he's my co-founder in Nuvana, and make sure that, and I would say this is the hardest thing in any kind of design, is the actual production of the design. So you really need a great producer. Fino was that producer, and from there, as you build it, the team comes. They get very excited about the kind of work that you're up to, and coders, designers, graphic designers, UI artists, etc., started gravitating very quickly to the project, which was really well funded generously by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Okay. And then Ron, I think the story is rather similar with you.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it wasn't. I met the 2 other co-founders while being at school, and we all had the same vision and started the company, so it wasn't that difficult.
And then Jay, your story is a little bit different because of your background. If you could just briefly kind of talk about how you were able to build your team and transition from your previous role into now being a founder.
Sure. Well, the first decision that I made when I came up with the idea with Bagooba was to not have a partner. My previous business was called UGO.com, and I had a few partners, and that was over an 8-year period. We had to exit the Hearst. This time around, I decided not to have a partner. And the first person I went to when I had the idea of building an empathy machine was a shrink, because I thought, how can you capture empathy without having a shrink's point of view? And the second person was a math guru algorithm. And we put the two of them together, and we ended up building mathematical rules for behavior. And from there, only after we had established those rules did I go out and find a great programming person, great UI person, some great marketing people.
Thanks. Actually, I'm going to follow up with you, Jay. What was the motivation behind making the change that you did?
So in the 90s, I was running a game studio, and one of the games that I greenlighted was this small game called Grand Theft Auto. Full disclosure, I'm still on the board of Rockstar, and I'm a big fan of video games and Grand Theft Auto. And I think the Hauser brothers are doing an amazing job. But essentially, after greenlighting that game and then running UGO, I had a life moment in 2005. I had LASIK surgery, and I had very severe complications as a result of LASIK. My vision was corrected, but it kicked off a central nervous system disorder for me, which was called BEB, and essentially I was blind for the better part of 2005, 2006, and even into 2007, meaning that I could not open my eyes. It was during that period of time, and I was still running my company, UGO. I was still commuting across town in New York City in the subway systems. You could only imagine that experience. It was during that period of time that I became very connected to the concept of empathy, as that sort of situation will connect you to that sort of thing. And so the idea, my business, came directly out of that experience. You can see now my eyes are much better, but it is 7 years later.
Same question to Ron. What was the motivation behind doing your business? And then did this change at all, the vision from what you're doing, what you wanted to do originally, to what you're doing today?
Yes. I mean, we've started in 2003, so you can imagine that over a period of 7, 8 years, you go through a lot of changes, and the industry around you and the needs change, and you obviously have to adapt to those. We didn't start with a very specific idea. We were just excited to try to combine what the clinical psychologist knew and what the game developer and programmer knew how to do in terms of interactive media and game design, and try to combine the two so people can actually have experiences where they actually learn and not just look at information that's presented to them. We didn't have a very specific skill that we wanted to address. We didn't have a specific market. We kind of went out there and started to see what is the need and where is the need that our passion is also aligned with. And we went through a number of iterations until really for the last 4 years, we're concentrating just in health, because we found out to really combine the technology of dealing with interpersonal skills, which is a great challenge if you're a game designer, with health, where we feel that there's obviously a business need, but also it aligns well with our passion on actually helping people have a better life and better outcomes.
And Joe, do you have a similar story as far as trying to adapt to the marketplace, or are you guessed right on the first go and you're doing exactly what you planned?
There was no plan. I was in feature filmmaking, and I was going to go right back to it as soon as we were done with this game. And that was about 2006-07, and I really haven't gone back, because subsequent or during every build that we did, a new client would show up and with a really exciting idea and ready to fund what we were able to do. And it's kind of been a nonstop ride trying to hang on to the tail of the tiger, and it's only been in the last year that we kind of looked up and said, the way in which we're going about this is really inefficient. And I think some of you probably went to Jesse Schell's presentation on the first day, and he has that 7-Eleven speech. What are the 7 things that games don't do very well, and the very first one on his list is they're not cheap. And every one of our clients, from Microsoft to Corporation for Public Broadcasting to the Nike Foundation, were these huge groups that could afford to pay for what it is that we did. But while we were doing it, very interesting, smaller organizations, businesses, schools, health organizations would come to us and say, we want what it is you guys do. And so we've changed from being building large custom projects one at a time to looking to make tool products that we can disseminate at a very cost-effective number that's highly customizable. So it's going from custom work to mass customization is really the pivot that we took.
Right, so throughout the process, you had to kind of adapt your business model to be more supportable.
Yes. And adapting without even knowing that we're adapting, because we come from a traditional film background and a lot of animation, you do rapid prototyping as you do those kinds of activities. So basically it transferred over very nicely.
And then, Anne, just very briefly, did you have to make a similar kind of adaptation along the process?
Yeah, well, we started off with a model that is essentially customizing or funded by NGOs. So we've run something for the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, we've run something for the United Nations Women, and so we built these little mobile games. But what we've learned now is that the distribution ecosystem in Africa is very, very challenging. We're building on mobile, but still kids don't have access to the OV store, they don't have credit cards and so on. So we're working now, that's on the one hand, and on the other hand, we also found that just building sort of separate individual games, we're not going to have the long-term impact that we want on individuals. We need to sort of interact repeatedly with different skills and learning. So we're now moving forward towards a more sort of platform-based world that has a series of games that deal with the very core skills that we have, but also looks at the ecosystem and starts trying to create a bigger engagement. So still, our goal is to shape and influence the way that African young people think and solve problems in their future, so that they're a different type of leader from the leader that we've had in the past. So we want to just sort of keep growing that. That vision hasn't changed. It's just the business model has had to shift. And we don't have business models to imitate really from the rest of the world, because it's completely different. You can't build for the iPads and and those sorts of platforms. So we're having to explore all the time what's happening. But Africa's shifting fast, so we're having to grow with it.
Great, thank you. I know you guys have sort of alluded to this in the previous questions, but if you could, in like 3 or 4 words, kind of describe how you got your first project or product funded, whether it was bootstrapping, angel funding, what be it. Let's start with Joe over on the left.
As I mentioned, our first project was funded by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Okay.
Our first project was for the school where we all met. We went to them once we graduated and got a small project to develop really a tiny, what was back then called an interactive tutorial, because you couldn't use the term game because people wouldn't buy games.
Jay?
Yeah, I was funded by individuals who did quite well in my earlier deal. It's a lot easier to raise money from people you've already made money for.
I funded the first game that we just built because we needed something to show. And we just sent that out for free everywhere, and then used that to go to the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund and convince them that we could do a bigger game. So we then did the second, so that was a real sort of first funding. So it was a combination of my bootstrapping and the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund that got us to sort of be out there.
Cool. It's interesting listening to the answers to the questions. Even though you guys all came from kind of different backgrounds, there are some commonalities. What is one suggestion you would have to? Actually, sorry, wrong question. What is one mistake you made that led to a better understanding of how to run your company? So.
What was that again?
One big mistake.
What is one mistake you made that led to a better understanding of how to run your company? So you guys are talking about evolving business models. The commonalities of running a business. What is one mistake that you think is common to running a business like this that led to a better understanding of how to avoid that in the future?
Well, it's probably more than one, but one thing that we were struggling at the beginning is the company was structured from, if you think about it, 3 people. One side is kind of an entrepreneur, business development, which always wants to put something out there so you can start generating sales and grow the company. And the other side is more of an innovator, which innovators are never and should never really be happy with what they do, so that they continuously obsess on making it better and better. So that creates some tension where you say we have something, and one side wants to put it out there, and the other side says like, well, we can do it better, we can do it better. So I think if there was one mistake, I wouldn't call it a mistake, but definitely a delay that was unnecessary, is that we waited too long in starting to put out there what we have. So if I have one recommendation is, obviously don't put things out there that you don't think are good, but if it's okay for companies like Apple to every 6 months or less put a new model, so you obviously know that they're already working on improvements while they're selling you the current version, it's okay for all of us. And so once we started changing that mindset, things got much better for us, and we got much more traction, sales, and growth.
Does anyone else have sort of a similar story or something completely on the other end of the spectrum?
That's great. I would say we have the exact same experience. Fail faster is my suggestion. And in the movie business, when you write screenplays, the best way to do it is just keep churning them out. Same way with games is you just don't know what's going to stick at the end of the day or what features are really important and are less so. And the only way to do that is to launch and get the feedback. And sometimes the feedback is really surprising, that the things that you spend the most time on are actually the least successful features, and the one that you kind of put in as an afterthought is what makes the game totally sticky. But you don't know that until you launch. If it doesn't work, then you move on to the next thing.
I have one quick one, which is be very clear at the beginning as to whether you're building a product or whether you're building a company, because they're very different things.
I think a big mistake for us was just to assume that it would be easy to actually raise the kind of money that we needed to build out the company. And so, I think you have to be much more circumspect, I think, as you look at the journey that's possible, especially when you're actually influencing and sort of shaping the ecosystem. So lots of lessons. Some of them are just psychological and, just being able to persevere.
Great. We're kind of eating into our QA time, so this is the last question, and if you guys could kind of make it rather brief. Imagine yourself in an elevator, you tell somebody, you make a quick introduction, and they say, oh, I would love to do that someday, start one of these businesses. What is one suggestion you have to someone who wants to start a business similar to yours, or is in the early stages of building one? What's that there's one little nugget of information you could disseminate to them quickly.
I think that it's okay to, I think the advice will be that it's okay to think about money, and it's okay to talk about money, even though we're all trying to do and benefit at the end the society and in terms of social change or health, whatever that is. I think if you don't start by thinking what is the need in the market and where is the money that will actually pay for whatever it is that you want to develop, you won't be successful. If you have a great idea for a product or a program or a simulation or a game, and you develop it and only then you start looking for people, it's just very unlikely statistically that you're going to be successful. So that's my advice, that it's okay to talk about it, it's okay to be an entrepreneur, it's okay to think who's going to pay for the rent, who's going to pay for the salaries, who's going to do all of that.
Anyone else?
For me, without a doubt, the biggest thing is to really be convinced that this is something that you want to do, and that it's important what you're doing, because there are many times when it's been really tough and it gets tough. I mean, I think really enterprise for me, especially from the world that I come from, is not for sissies. So, you know, and I only realized that I was not a sissy once I got through this process, but you have to just be able to believe in there. There have been temptations. People throw carrots in front of you. Here's a job that's just a fantastic kind of job, and, you know, you'll be some big shot or whatever it might be, and I'd have to reflect and ask myself, you know, why am I doing this again? You know, and I've had to do a sort of constant spiritual and faith and sort of mind check to see, do I really believe that this is going to happen? And that's really what has kept me going. So I think it's really important, especially if you're in this Games for Change world, to know what it is that you're up to, what is it that you're trying to do, and is it possible to do? I believe we can change the lives of African children. I believe we can end poverty in Africa in my lifetime, and that's what keeps me pushing.
I would just say build a product that's differentiated in the market space, with the proviso being that the music's going to stop again, because it always stops. And when the music stops, you want to have a position in the market space that is sustainable.
Awesome. Well, we're actually almost out of time. I apologize that we haven't had a chance to take some questions from the audience. This is followed by a 15-minute break, so if anybody wants to stick around, feel free to follow up with any questions you might have. I just want to say thank you to our panelists. I think they've done a great job kind of giving us the backstory on how they got to where they're at now, and really inspired us to think about, you know, what we might be able to accomplish in the future, whether it be at a company already managing or thinking about starting our own company. So thank you very much.